All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 290 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. I'm your host, Seth Hensley. I come on twice a week, every week, on Thursday and Sunday to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but how I try to equip and encourage you in your pursuit of that goal. And today we're going to be reviewing a video by the Unplanned Podcast, which is a podcast by Matt and Abby. And I've loved watching Matt and Abby in the past because they're a couple who has kind of the story of the avatar of this show, and that is somebody who really wants to get married young, encounters the problems of getting married young, and solves those for the sake of the joy set before them, which is more time together. Okay, and they've done a wonderful job at this. They're doing very well. They have a huge YouTube following, and they've made that their means of supporting a family. And it's just a really cool story to have watched unfold. But today they're going to be interviewing Jinger Duggar. And for those of you who don't know who the Duggars are, you're going to get to know them better today. We're going to talk about courting, I Kiss Dating Goodbye, Joshua Harris, the Duggars, and kind of why courtship is not enough. Okay, a lot of people, especially in the homeschool / Christian circles that I grew up in, were under the impression that the Duggars and I Kiss Dating Goodbye and Joshua Harris had the perfect dating philosophy. And their dating philosophy was essentially that you shouldn't date, but you should court instead. They use the word courtship or courting. And this seemed that some people accuse this of being, an antiquated term for a modern day means of finding a spouse, but that's actually not my problem with it. I have nothing, no problem with the word courting or even some of the tenets of courting, but we're going to Google, just the summary of all of the tenets of courtship, and I'm going to review them for you really quick before we jump into this video, because it's not exactly what you might think it would be, okay? And so Google is defining courtship here as Harris believed, right here, you can see on my screen, it says Harris believed that courting was a healthier alternative to mainstream dating, which he thought was based on facades. It believes in courtship. One of the big tenets of courtship is group dating. Harris thought that group dates were a better way to get to know somebody because people are less likely to maintain facades in a group setting. They also believed in involving parents. Harris's courtship system involved more involvement from parents of both parties than traditional dating. God's will. Harris believed that people should seek God's will in their dating lives through prayer and reading His word. Friendship before dating. Harris believed that it was important to get to know somebody before escalating a relationship too quickly. And then his last tenet there is sexual purity. Harris believed that people should wait until marriage before having sex. Now let me go through these. All the tenets here that Google's outlined for I Kiss Dating Goodbye and tell you which ones I have a problem with. And so, and we'll get into why I have a problem with them as we listen to Jinger Duggar in the video we're going to watch in a second. But number one, courting instead of dating. People have this sort of cultish following around courting, and it's not like I don't mean that in a strict sense, but there's this attitude of superiority when you talk about courtship versus dating. But what I found is that most people who say they're a big fan of courting really can't define what that word originally meant in the I Kiss Dating Goodbye book. And so basically they're just hopping on this bandwagon of, I found a superior mode of dating, when in reality I have no idea what the, courting entails. And so just, you can't just say I prefer courting to dating just because you like the word better. You have to have a reason for why you like it better. The first one up here, and I think this is the most harmful one, is group dates. So this guy, Joshua Harris, basically thought that you should be constantly chaperoned by either people your age or younger siblings or parents. And, while that does prevent sexual mistakes in the context of dating, what it also does is it means that you don't know your significant other any better than you know your brother or sister or mom or dad. And this is the person that, ideally you should be pursuing the goal of marriage with, right? One of the good principles, the good tenets of, I Kiss Dating Goodbye was that you should date to get married, which I agree with. That is definitely good. You should not date somebody just to have fun, or you should not date somebody to find out if it, works out in the end or whatever. That's really powerless language. You decide if it works out, you decide if it's a good idea, and then you follow through on your word, right? So if you can't follow through on your word, or if you're not interested enough in someone to know I can stick around for the long haul, then I would highly suggest you don't start dating that person. Definitely agree with that principle of Joshua Harris's book, but the group dates is where you lose me, because in trying to get to know someone and bond towards the goal of marriage, if you have constantly someone around, there are going to be no intimate discussions. There's going to be no discussion of hard issues. There's going to be basically, as close as you get to the person you're with, that's how you're going to be getting equally close to the brother or the friend that was sent with you as a chaperone. The whole principle of marriage and the whole principle of dating is that you have many things with the person you're with that you don't share with anyone else. And so by including, third parties into your dating relationship here, you are, basically sharing stuff that is not designed to be shared, in my opinion. You're going to run into bonding trouble. You're not going to have any serious talks. You're not going to share any very serious personal history, because again, there's 50 people in the room. The number might not be that high, but my point is there are other people in the room that, if you, once again, everything you're sharing with the person that you're with is being received by other people as well. So it's impossible to build intimacy in that context. It's impossible to bond with somebody on a romantic level in that context, because again, romance is between two people. It's a very Christian fundamental tenet of romance. It is between two people. Christians are not polyamorous. We don't believe in basically giving everyone everything. At least I don't think you should. Everyone should not have equal access to you, as Danny Silk would put it. And my potential spouse, my dating partner, my future marriage partner, I believe should know more about me and be closer to me than other people that were sent, with us on the date. And so that's the problem I have with group dates. It also just doesn't work practically. You can't just think about this for a minute. Try having a romantic night where, you're with somebody that you are deeply in love with, and there's two people that you're not in love with sitting next to you watching the whole time. It ruins everything. Involving parents, I definitely agree with this one. So, I just think this is just common sense, because your parents, if you don't involve your parents, you're basically throwing out the window two people who have brilliant insight and wisdom into your life. A lot of times what I say on this show, as we're a show for young believers, is that you shouldn't make a decision based on teachings, the words of pastors, etc., unless you measure what's being given to you against Scripture, your own personal experience, and the advice and wisdom of those mentors in your life who are older and wiser than you and who know you best. And if you throw parents out of the dating picture, you're actually losing two of the best sources of wisdom that your relationship has access to. And so do not throw your parents out of the dating process. Please make sure you're talking to them, telling them things that happen, getting their input, asking what they think they think you should approach different scenarios with your partner. And again, I'm talking to people who have parents who are on their team. Obviously, I know that some parents in the world, are, for whatever reason, on a different mission than their child's happiness and their child's long-term ultimate fulfillment. And so I'm not, obviously, if your parents are like that, then I'm not talking to you here, but most parents I find are very loving and other-centered, self-giving people who want nothing but the best for their children. And so please involve them in the dating process, guys. I mean, they know you better than anybody else. They took care of you from the time you were little until now. And so as you transition into, cleaving to another person other than your parents and leaving, your parents emotionally as the first place of priority in your life, it's good. Just involve them in the process. They have a lot of insight they can share with you. God's will, he says that you should include God's will. I have a lot of, I agree with that. Obviously, I think that God's will, as a believer, I think God's will is ultimately what we should choose to do. And, when we don't choose to do God's will, bad things happen. Now, what Joshua Harris believes by God's will is, I think Joshua Harris popularized this idea that there is one person in the world who is God's will for you to marry, and should you miss that person, basically your life is going to fall apart. And that, I think, is an incorrect perspective to view how God set up the world. I think God's will has lots of options in it, and those options you then get to choose from. And should your marriage fall apart, you don't get to blame God or other people by looking back and saying, well, it was I just missed God's will, or God gave me this person and she just left. No, you made the choice to marry this person. You made the choice, using your foresight and the guidance of the Holy Spirit to look into your future and see the consequences that were going to come from marrying this person. And you made the choice to marry her. So don't blame other people or God for the, nuptial mess of your life. That I react to, but I do think that God's will is the good choice. Whatever the good choice is in your life, I believe that's God's will. Friendship before dating, I hugely disagree with this one. Mainly because I think if you've been good friends with somebody for an extended period of time, if there was a relationship that was potential there, or if there was an attraction, a romantic attraction, it would have come to surface a long time ago. And you can, instead of basically what people do, I think, is they try and force a romantic attraction by picking somebody that is a good, moral person. They have a great relationship with the Lord. They have solid character. They have a similar vision for their life as you, but you're just not attracted to them. And you still try and force this connection with them because they check all the other boxes. But attraction is a big box, guys, that I think needs to be checked because, again, that's one of the only things that are romantic and connection has that other kinds of relationship don't. That's one of the things that separates it from other connections. With my wife, romance is one of the only things that I have with her that I have with no one else. I have other people in my life who are kind. I have other people in my life who are on a similar mission to me. I have other people in my life who I have friendship with, but I don't have anyone else in my life who I have a romantic connection with. And that's one of the things that sets marriage and romantic relationships apart from friendship. And so I don't think it's a good idea that you should be super good friends before dating. I don't think, in fact, sometimes I don't even think it's a good idea to select a mate from your friendship circles if you've been friends with all of them for a long time, because again, why has that supposed romantic attraction not been acted on sooner? Usually the answer is it's not there. And you're trying to force something just because you think it's a good idea. Sexual purity, I do think this one's good, but I think this one is blown way out of proportion priority-wise. People act like sexual mistakes are the worst thing that you can do with your life. And I definitely don't think so. I think it's totally natural to find your potential spouse sexually attractive, and you actually should find somebody that you're sexually attracted to. Like, I don't think you should just go out and, randomly select a believer off of the street who seems to have a good worldview to marry if you're not sexually and romantically attracted to them. I think that's a bad idea. Again, because sexual and romantic attraction are one of the things that set marriage apart from other kinds of relationships. No other relationship you have has those things. So make sure, unless you just want a friendship, that your relationship for marriage has the sexual and romantic attraction, because that's one of the things that separates it from other kinds of love, right? And so those are the things that, Joshua Harris talks about that I have a problem with. Those are the tenets of courtship and the ones that I disagree with. Let's listen to Jinger Duggar explain kind of what her story as far as courting, and we'll pause throughout and talk about it.
For me, it seemed like it was going to be, like more normal because like my family, all of them just did this courtship thing. But then when it comes down to where it's like, it's actually you in the courtship. Mm-hmm. I think even Jeremy being an outsider coming in, looking at it, and we would talk through like, okay, are we going to have my 10-year-old brother there as my chaperone to be with us at dinner or in the car? It was interesting. Once we were engaged, especially, like, I think that's where I started to realize, oh, wow, we actually need time to talk about things that we need to talk about, just us. And so if he came out to visit, we were long distance. He was in Texas. I was in Arkansas. So if he flew out to visit for a weekend, he would say, okay, I'm going to call you when I get home. Or like if he was, even if we were like in person, we needed to talk.
Because your 10-year-old brother's there. You're
yes.
Like, he doesn't need to hear
you can't talk.
Right. Okay. So you just heard her basically, this is somebody who did courtship. Her family did courtship growing up, and they basically believed in constant chaperoning. And again, they give the reason of, Joshua Harris, I believe his exact words were, people put on less facades when they're in a group. But really, I think that was code for We are so terrified of sexual mistakes that we will sabotage the dating relationship and the ability of these two people to bond towards the goal of marriage in order to prevent sexual errors. And, I understand, I do think sexual immorality is very clearly defined in scripture and wrong. But what I also know is, my mentor told me a story one time. He said that there was a woman he knew in high school who made some sexual errors and she ended up getting pregnant outside of wedlock. Okay, so she has a child really early in life, and there are difficulties that come with that. But then he contrasted that person that he knew with the, example of another woman he knew who was basically adopting the courtship style of dating. And she was looking for a spouse. And it was very hard to find somebody who was in line with this courtship ideology, to match her with. And so she's looking and looking and looking, and suddenly, and sometimes she was even not looking. She was using the excuse of, well, God will just give someone to me in the future if he has someone for me. In other words, adopting a really passive attitude about, whether or not she ended up marrying or not, and whether or not she pursued, I would say, God's will for her life as a married woman or not. And so she adopted this passive attitude, and then finds herself one day waking up at 50 with not only no partner, but with no children, and therefore no grandchildren. And suddenly, through this mistake of passivity and this mistake of a bad dating approach, she finds herself in a situation that is much worse than the woman who made a sexual error. The woman who made a sexual error now has grandchildren, right? The woman who made a sexual error now has a partner, right? Yes, there are problems. Yes, they're going to have to work through those. Yes, it's not easy raising a child by yourself or when you are young with a partner. But she now, at the age of 50, has grandchildren. And the woman in the second scenario who chose courtship and basically putting off dating into her future does not. She does not have any children, grandchildren, or a partner. And so I think there are bigger mistakes that you can make than sexual errors. And so I think that to undermine the ability of two people to bond on a romantic level, it just in order to prevent sexual errors is a fool's errand. It's a fool's errand. And you can hear Ginger Duggar sharing her story here of how basically if you are insisting upon having somebody there constantly whenever you're on a date with your partner, that person is going to know you just as well as your partner will, which I think there's a problem with. I think there's a hierarchy, guys. God should know me first. I should have the best relationship with God, and then my spouse, and then my children, right? And there's a very clear hierarchy here. And this is disrupting that hierarchy of relationship. This is basically saying that, a younger brother or a younger friend or somebody else is knowing everything about me that my partner does, my person that I'm moving towards the goal of marriage with does. And that I think is a huge problem. And you can see, like she just said, there were some things that they needed to talk about that her brother shouldn't have information about. Maybe there was a traumatic incident in her life that she needed to share with her partner in order for her partner to know basically, hey, I'm coming to the relationship with this baggage and you need to know that. And if her brother's sitting right there, I mean, it might be something very personal. I don't think that's a place. I don't think that's the place for a brother or another friend. I think that is something that should be shared with somebody that you're moving towards the goal of marriage with and not somebody else, if that makes sense. So let's continue to see what else she says. And again, that's the biggest problem, I think, with the courtship ideology is the group dating aspect. Group dates are the worst idea I think I've ever heard in my life. Absolutely awful idea.
You can't talk about that when you're about to get married. So
I never did the only chaperones we would use is like we'd go on a double date or something because I just wasn't going to do.
He was like, nah.
I wasn't going to have a 10-year-old kid with me.
Yeah.
Like
double dates are not dates. Double dates are outings with friends as a couple. There's a huge difference. Dates are times that you set apart between you and your significant other to where nothing is going to distract you from getting to know one another and talk about serious things and bond. Double dates are times where you go out to have a good time and visit with friends who are in a similar season to yourself. Those are two very missionally different ideas. And double dates are great, but they have a totally different purpose than dates. And so again, I think to bring people into the date, not the double date, but the date is a terrible idea that undermines your ability to fulfill the mission of what dating should be, right? And so, again, I'm a fan of double dates, but I think they should stay in the double dates category because they're different than actual dates.
it was kind of absurd. So,
so just going to dinner.
I was just like, you know what, Ben and Jess, you want to go on a double date
Did
or
this
something?
happen
Yeah,
after you
we
played
did double
professional
dates a lot.
soccer?
Oh yeah, and
So you'd been like, I'm sure. I don't know if you've like traveled the world doing that.
Yeah,
but you must have just been like a guy, just being a
Right.
guy, and then you're like, okay, now I need a 10-year-old on my date with
So
my
that wasn't gonna happen.
girlfriend.
And he was pastoring a
But-
church at the time.
Okay.
I'm like doing
You know,
marriage
it's like-
counseling.
How old
It's
were you?
crazy.
I was 27.
He's 27. So
You're old. You were older than me when this
Yeah,
was
dude.
going on.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that
dude.
was the thing.
Yeah.
It's like I would literally go from like pastoring a church, I'm doing marriage counseling, and then step into a setting where it was like those rules, and that's where I say it was like playing the rules.
And again, the reason that Joshua Duggar or the Harrises and Joshua Harris propose, or that the Duggars and the Harris adopt this courting ideology, is in order to prevent sexual errors. But again, just to kind of harp on this note, there are worse mistakes that you can make with someone than a sexual error, and I will die on that hill. For example, I have just held hands with people who I was not confident in their ability to stick around. And that ended up biting me in the butt more than sexual errors I made, right? Because there are more even just holding hands or just sharing a kiss or just giving someone a hug who doesn't know how to stick around is way more detrimental to you and leads to death more than making a mistake sexually with someone that you care about and who she is going to be able to stick around, right? If you are in a relationship with somebody who you're confident in her ability to match your interest, commitment, and investment level, and you make a sexual mistake with her, that is way less harmful. I agree, it is still sin, but it is way less harmful to make that error with someone that you know is going to stick around than it is to just hold hands with somebody who does not know how to stick around. Okay? And I know this to be true from personal experience, and also just think about it, right? If somebody can stick around, you're going to be less harmed by a sexual mistake with them than you are with a person if you just hold hands with a person who cannot stick around, right? Let's continue to see what he says here.
It's not the game. It was like so
like that.
focused on the rules,
Yeah.
missing the point of what we're doing, the objective here,
Yes.
which is like
True.
And I told her honestly, and this is why I wouldn't be pro courtship or anything. If I need, because the spirit behind it is good, right? Like, oh, you want to have purity and you want to really focus on each other and not get physically entangled. And okay. But if I really need these rules to keep me moral, I'm not a good dude. Like,
There's a
don't marry
problem.
me. Like, if the only thing keeping me pure and focused on her and loving her well is like a chaperone, I'm not a good person.
True.
Like,
True. And you can see how this has kind of played out through the years. Joshua Harris has now, in my opinion, kind of gone off the deep end. I think he's even kind of turned his back on his faith in Jesus Christ, and he's kind of, you just look up some of the stuff he's saying now. I definitely disagree with it now. He's totally come 360 from where he was when he wrote this book, and I think that is a mistake. And again, I think one of the reasons is because you have bad people sometimes adopting these strategies in order to keep themselves in check instead of just, basically showing the fruit of the spirit that is self-control and realizing that, yes, we all have bad, desires. We all have a flesh impulse a lot of the time, but you are the master over that and you are a new creation, right? And so you should have total control over yourself as a man as far as, not doing wrong things to a woman that you care about, and that you can look up some of the things that the Duggars have been through now. One of them, I think, don't quote me on this, but pretty sure he's in prison for possession of CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. And again, just I think a lot of bad people, you can kind of look at an ideology and judge it based on the people who present it. And if you have bad people who are really hurting and really struggling, presenting ideologies as prescriptions to solve modern dating problems, you can kind of judge their prescription based on the quality of their character. And so if you have somebody who's really, really struggling and in a bad situation, proposing ideas to solve problems, you can kind of reject those just based on the quality of the character that is presenting them, right? And so I think he's got a point there.
I need to work on self-control. So we saw through those boundaries. And here's the deal. You can get around boundaries if you want to get around boundaries.
True.
Legalism and rules never accomplish. It looks like it's going to work, but it never does what it actually doesn't deal with the issue. And so Ginger and I honestly looked at our courtship and said, we'll make the most of it. I wanted to obviously respect that. And so
yeah, Jared was so respectful, like coming into that setting. He didn't have like an attitude about him, which I think I really appreciated that. And I think he didn't even know all of what he was getting himself into. I always tell him, I'm like, you didn't know what you're getting yourself into when you stepped into our world. But he was so good about like, okay, I'm going to jump through these hoops because this is like what's required of me. And then, you know, we'll have our lives together.
I want to ask how that even
Basically, you know, that I think this guy seems like a really solid guy so far. He entered into his wife's world and her family's rules, and he said, I will submit myself to these rules, even though I think they are more borderline morally wrong in order to be with you. And not morally wrong in the sense of I'm doing something wrong, because he needs to maintain a good moral character, but borderline, like, I think these rules are harmful and they're not helping our relationship, but I'm still going to subject myself to these rules in order to, you know, actually get the goal of spending time with you for the rest of our lives together. I think that's a beautiful thing, guys. I mean, I wouldn't want to do courtship with a woman at all. But I think it's really impressive that in fact, I don't think it works. I think it's a wrong way to find a partner. But I think it's really beautiful that he entered into that for the sake of the joy set before him again, which that's the scriptural language for basically, hey, I have this reward. Jesus endured the cross for the joy set before him. It's a terrible death, worst death humans have devised, but he endured that for the sake of us, right? And a restored opportunity for connection with us, right? And so, yeah, I just think that's a beautiful thing that he did, and I wanted to stop and give him a kudos for that. Really cool.
happened in the first place? Like, did you, because you guys met at a conference, did you say, come back home and be like, Mom, Dad, there's this guy. Did you ask to court him?
No.
Like, how does that even work? Getting started in that.
It was crazy. So whenever he showed up there, I met him at that conference, and it wasn't until later, like, how many months later was that? Several. It was several. It was December.
Five or six, yeah.
So 5 or 6 months went by, and he was talking to Ben and Jessa. And you'd visited like one other time, came to our house in between then, just to hang out with my brother-in-law because they were friends. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I have some sister-in-laws, you know." My brother-in-law.
He's
told
like,
him.
I got a few.
And so yeah, he has some to choose from. Here you go. Just take your pick. So he took his pick, and it worked out. But it was like, what happened was, though, he signed up for a missions trip that we were all going on.
Yeah, I started to like her, and I'm like strategizing with Jessa.
How
and Jessa's
can I get
like,
to know her?
She's like, she's like, go on this missions trip because you have all these guys coming trying to get to know these girls. Obviously, there's a wall up because of the TV and all that.
Amazon AI rocks.
While they do this ad, I do want to say that I think, again, this is the situation that you find yourself in if you're courting. You resort to missions trips as opportunities to get to know girls because all the other opportunities that you use to get to know girls have been removed from possibility. So like if you throw dating out the window, if you throw out the window the ability of two people to come together and discuss and bond and have conversation and build a romantic connection together, then suddenly you're resorting to missions trips as opportunities to create potential spouse opportunities. And I think that's insane. I mean, I think the purpose of a missions trip is to evangelize and make disciples of all nations. And suddenly, because there's no other opportunity for meeting women, that becomes the breeding ground for romantic connection, which I just think is like so, it's just not the purpose of mission trips. And it's also like, it's shooting both purposes in the foot because you're trying to cram two purposes into this one venture and you're doing neither well. It's like multitasking. You don't try and go on a missions trip to find a mate and to evangelize. Like, it's just like, you need to pick a mission. Okay. Pick a mission and go for it. That's what you find yourself in when you remove the ability of two people to get to know one another through the context of dating, I think. And again, I think dating can be just as harmful as courtship if done wrong. And I think, again, my main tenets for a healthy dating relationship are find somebody who is attracted to you, find somebody that you're attracted to, find somebody that is a follower of Jesus, and find somebody who matches your investment, commitment, and interest level. If you can do those things, those 4 steps, again, Find somebody who is attracted to you. Find somebody that you are attracted to. Find somebody that is a believer in Jesus Christ, a sincere one, and find somebody who matches your investment, interest, and commitment level and is moving towards the goal of marriage with you. If you can find somebody like that, by golly, do not ever give up on that relationship and fight for that to your last breath, friends, because that is a rare occurrence. There are only 4 boxes I just gave you there, but it is very, very hard to find somebody who checks those 4 boxes. Incredibly difficult. And I know this from personal experience. It took me years to find somebody who did that. And I am married now, and I cannot imagine going back to my season of singleness. Sorry, it was absolutely miserable. Would not recommend it to anyone for any sustained period of time ever. And so I understand the challenges you're going through. Just follow those 4 steps. Otherwise, dating and courtship, I think, are not good enough.
This missions trip, you'll get to know my family really well.
And it was being recorded for the show.
No, that one wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
No, that one wasn't.
I don't think so. They had already filmed a lot of them. I don't think they wanted to go on that.
So I signed up for that, and so that was Jess's kind of a helpful strategy. And she's like, you'll get to see Jinger as well, like for this. I think it was a week long.
Yeah, we were
trip.
gone for like 2 weeks. I think you only came for like
Yeah.
the first part, and
so
it was great.
I went like, okay, I want to get to know her obviously better, but I also want to get to know her family and stuff. And so it was organic. It was as organic as it could be.
It was really pretty chill. We were
Yeah.
on like a big missions group with like, I don't know, 60 other people or so. We were able to just like be around each other on that trip, away from like even filming and stuff, which is great. Less pressure that way. And it was awesome because whenever we came back from that trip, well, he had talked to my dad at the end of that trip. You can tell him about that.
Yeah, and I just expressed interest. And so he wanted to get to know me, obviously, which is
Was that
understandable.
like a high pressure conversation to enter into?
No, I don't think so. He probably saw it coming a mile away.
Oh, okay.
You know, like,
It's like you're talking to his daughter all this time, and
yeah. I think I'm
you
being
came
slick,
all
like
the
on this
way
missions
here.
trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he
Yeah,
signed up like a week before the trip.
Yeah.
And
He's
we had signed
he's
up like
seen
several
this.
months before. They allowed him to like come last minute.
I think Jessa pulled some
So
strings
Jessa
on
was
it.
like, we got to get this guy on this trip.
But so he,
yeah,
he saw it
could
coming,
tell.
I think. But so I just asked him like, hey, I want to get to know her, and he was like, yeah, she's great. And I was like, I know. And he's like, well, you need to get to know me first. So
I mean, yeah. What was that conversation though?
it was like a 3-minute conversation. I remember it.
Oh,
It was-
pretty short.
yeah,
I would have thought it was like a long, because you literally watched 60
would've
hours
thought there
of
was
Bill
like a
Gothard's
pamphlet.
teachings.
Well, no, this was
So-
later. That was
Whoa,
later.
That was
Okay.
later. Yeah.
So
no,
that
It
was
wasn't-
like
wasn't the
Abby
end of
said,
it.
we got our timeline. We zoomed forward. So I asked Mr. Duggar, and then he's like, let's get to know each other first. And then that's where him and I start talking. And he actually asked me soon after to start watching the Gothard stuff.
Was
And
it
so
a
that
VHS
resulted-
tape? Like, how did you get this?
No, they had
It's
a
online.
website. It's streamed online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
stream online.
And
Was there
so-
questions afterward to make sure you actually watched it?
Oh yeah, we would talk about it.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Yeah, we would talk on Friday mornings and chat about it. And at first, it was interesting because, you know, going back to the whole Gothard thing, I was just like, oh, this guy's got some interesting things to say. And it was kind of philosophical. And I remember in one of our first conversations, Jinger and I talking about those, she asked me what I thought. And I went, yeah, he's not a Bible teacher, but he's got some interesting things to say. I think that's like my exact sentence. And I think for her, she was like, what?
It was really shocking.
Because she thought he
Like,
was
this is
the
a
Bible
Bible
He
teacher.
was the
Yeah.
most amazing
Wow.
person.
Yeah,
you know?
That's crazy.
But at the time, he would. So that's what made Gothard effective, was he had a cultural analysis which was accurate. It was the solution that got wonky. So he would he talked about the rise of humanism and secularism, and you're just going, yeah, that's right, you know. And so those initial sessions I watched, I would at times go, ooh, that's a little interesting, but there weren't like alarm bells going off, you know.
Yeah, it
And-
wasn't until the further in you get
Yeah.
to the teachings.
And with Jim Bob, did he ask you questions about, have you dated somebody before? Have you kissed
Oh
someone
my
before?
goodness, bro! I had a 50-page questionnaire I filled out.
Wait, you're kidding. It was actually a
dead serious.
sheet.
Yeah.
So it was like, how far have you been with a woman?
Yeah, everything.
Every single question. Have you smoked weed? Have you
Everything.
drank? All those questions
Everything.
in there. What was
My-
the most bizarre one that was like, what is, like, anything that threw you off that wasn't expected on the sheet?
Probably all of it. I don't know. I think it started out like,
Do you have any debt? What is,
Oh yeah.
you know?
So it was
like all this-
financial. It was moral. It was relationships. It was past history. It was
Family's history.
Oh, it was
everything.
view on finances, view
Yeah.
on debt, view on family, view on kids, view on. I mean, it was like.
Was it
the whole thing.
provided by the IBLP or did he create it?
Somebody
I think
sent it
somebody
to him.
in the
Okay.
IBLP
Yeah, I
did
think
it, though.
somebody did, and they sent it to him.
And low key,
he's
it
like,
was
"Oh."
actually. It's like I wasn't
It-
mad at it because it's a great conversation.
It seems really crazy if it's. I mean, it was crazy. But I'm just saying, like, it actually did end up on the flip side of it. It ended up producing a lot of conversation for us.
It's great.
Okay, so basically, I don't really have a serious problem. You might think I'm crazy for this, but I don't have a serious problem with that form. But I think it's odd that I don't know. I feel like that the topics of interest on those sheets should have been discussed between Jinger and this man here. I don't know his name. I don't think they've mentioned his name yet in this video. Jinger, Duggar, and this guy that seems really awesome. I think they should have discussed those issues prior to, getting invested in the relationship, rather than basically his dad having to hand him a sheet that has them all listed out. It's like, I really think you don't have to find things out about the person that you're marrying after the proposal or after you start dating. I'm a firm believer that you can find out everything you need to know in order to make a well-informed decision as to whether or not you want to marry somebody prior to popping the question. And so if you actually have conversed with the person that you're with and built the trust needed and covered all of the serious issues about not only your past history and everything, but also your worldview and your life mission, then that paper becomes irrelevant because you've talked about it as a couple, which again, that will only happen if you're by yourselves and there isn't your 10-year-old brother sitting right there or some other friend sitting right there, right? You're not going to talk about the rather touchy or serious issues on that sheet of paper. Again, if you have your best friend sitting next to you, I wouldn't. I would not have talked to my wife about the serious things I needed to know about her worldview, her history, her past, her life mission. If there was, a friend sitting next to me or a brother sitting next to me, would not have done it. It would have been way harder. It would have been conversational gymnastics, and I would have been trying to get my brother out of the room for many justifiable reasons. None of them sexual, by the way. And so let's kind of see, we're wrapping up here, guys, but let's see how they wrap this video up.
Because
Yeah.
We're gonna
I was
hash
able
out
to kind of look
everything
at that and I
the
was like,
beginning.
But-
okay,
and here's
I'm just gonna
where,
look through
like-
this and see.
Honestly, now that I'm
Yes,
thinking, I'm
no,
like,
maybe.
I was about to be like, that's
Pretty
crazy.
convenient.
But when I'm thinking about this, I'm like, that's kind of good. Like, if you're marrying somebody that has $200,000 of student loans,
Matt
you
thinks
might
that's
want to
funny.
avoid that relationship.
Bro,
Yeah.
and just wait. If you guys have
Yeah.
a daughter,
That's a horrible thing to
I'm
say.
serious. If you
Right?
guys have a
I
daughter-
mean, seriously, come
But
on.
if you're a
now.
teacher, and you
You're
marry
gonna
someone,
be handing these out. You're making photocopies.
done.
Abby,
It's already done.
We could have gone to school at like Michigan, right, where it was $60,000 a year, and put all that into, like, that would have all been debt. And then here we have an arts degree. Like, how do you make money with an arts degree when you have what is that, $240,000 in debt?
Well, again, a good question that you should know the answer to prior to entering a dating relationship or popping the question. And again, the way you do that is by simply talking to the person that you're getting to know. I mean, you don't have to have a checklist, a paper spreadsheet of these things. You know what these big issues are, right? You know what these big issues are. And so if there's a deal breaker for you, please discuss that before jumping into the water, right? Look before you leap is a good saying for a reason, man. You look and you ask the things you need to ask prior to popping the question or entering a committed or defined relationship with this person. In my opinion, it's common sense. Some people disagree. They think dating should be more fun. And I say that's how you end up with heartbreak and people who are single in their 50s.
He's
60
crunching
times
numbers
4?
right now.
Right? That's
He's
a
going
$250,000 in
But
debt.
so here's the crazy
Anyway.
thing. So
Yeah, I like that.
So, like I said, like the motivation for a lot of that was good because a lot of couples. This is what happens. Couples get involved physically. They get involved on like superficial personality traits, like, oh my goodness, we get along so good because we both love the same movies. And they actually go real serious, real fast with an intense relationship, and oftentimes never actually hit the reality of life and engage on the reality of things that are years down the road. But because it's such a superficially based relationship, they're not thinking permanence. They're not thinking long term. And so, when you think about what a marriage is, when you're saying I do, and you're saying those cute words, in sickness and in health, well, in poverty and wealth, no, that's real. And life is hard and life is difficult. And love is not a feeling first. It's a decision that
Yes.
results in feelings,
Man,
but it's
this guy is really good. I like this guy. You need to discuss the issues first. If you're looking at dating as, an opportunity to have fun or an opportunity to, basically figure out whether or not somebody is the one for you, I disagree with that wholeheartedly, again, because you're getting to know this person on an intimate level without the commitment. You're getting to know this person on an intimate level without even knowing whether you like them or not. You're getting to know this person on an intimate level with no communication whatsoever that this is actually going to go the long haul, right? And so you find yourselves having gotten closer to this person and suddenly, oh man, we just came across an issue that's a deal breaker for me. Shoot, I guess we'll start from ground zero, blow this whole thing we've been creating up and break one another's hearts because we didn't have the foresight to look into the future and see this as a long-term thing. That's the problem with short-term commitments. Short-term relationships have no place in the modern dating world, in my opinion. And this guy is I think he's just hitting all the nails on the head here. Awesome job.
self-sacrificial decision to commit to someone regardless of anything else. No matter what happens, I love you the way Christ has loved me, which means I love you in spite of your failures, mistakes, in spite of whatever life throws at us. I am choosing to love you.
That's so good.
That's heavy. And so people who go into marriages, and I do pre-marriage counseling all the time, people go into marriage not thinking about the basic foundational elements of life.
All right, so listen up. Stay farm.
So while he runs this ad again, I just want to say that people who do that, though, are immature. And immature people are the people that courtship was designed for. People who have no self-control, who have no foresight, who have no wisdom. And therefore, people heap rules on them in order to supposedly keep them safe, but they're inadvertently sabotaging that couple's ability to do very necessary things that will help them get married, such as discuss very important issues and bond on a level that is above the bond of a friend and a friend, right? And so guys, I've really enjoyed this video. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you're interested in the rest of this video, please check it out. I will include the link in the show notes on YouTube. So please go listen to the rest of this video if you enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Reach out and let me know what your thoughts were on the episode and what I said. You can message me on social media or comment on the videos on YouTube or social media there as well to let me know what you think. It would make this podcasting system two-way instead of a boring monologue. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to this, and I will talk to you guys next time.